Hey, what's up? How are you doing today? Donna St. Louis here, live on Facebook. Um, I got a really interesting question today from this guy at Forbes magazine who was writing an article. And one of the questions that he asked me was specifically about my my drive, my motivation, what made me think that I could be an entrepreneur, right? Especially when we started looking at my background, because, one of the things he was talking about was, you came from a very meager upbringing, which is true. Hey, Michael, how are you doing? And most people would say when you come from that type of upbringing, you're not necessarily exposed to all the opportunities that other people are exposed to, right? And I will admit that at the time, the one thing that was really, I guess, prevalent, especially where I grew up, what was really prevalent was that you would get a job with the government, right? So that's what you would do. You would go, you would get a good job with the government, you'd stay at that job, you work there for 100 years, and then you would retire. And so he goes, so what made you think that you could be an entrepreneur? What really kind of drove you? Well, my grandmother was an entrepreneur. And specifically, she had what we call in the hood, the candy lady house, right? So that means that she had the house right, in Miami, in the projects that was right across the street from the park. And she would sell candy out of her house. And, it was candies and cake and junk food and snacks and anyway, all that kind of stuff. And in today's money, that house is probably somewhere around, I don't know, maybe worth like, her business is probably doing about $100,000 a year in today's money. But I remember my grandmother, by the way, only had a fourth grade education. So, but she could tell you about profit margins. My grandmother, think about this. This woman has a fourth grade education. She was born in 1919. She had, again, fourth grade education. She lived in the hood, but she could tell you profit margins. She could tell you approximately how much something could cost, what her loss was going to be or depreciation. She really understood basically retail. There was no social media, but she did market testing. She knew if she was going to try something new, she would test it out with her market first. Right. So my grandmother was a very, very smart woman. And at the time, I didn't recognize that she had all this entrepreneurial swagger. Right. So I really didn't recognize the entrepreneurial swagger that my grandmother had, but clearly she had a lot of it. But one of the lessons that she taught me, which is completely outside of the entrepreneurial realm, was my grandmother said, you only have 3 things of value in life. Can you guess what they are? So in my little mind, I'm like, well, allowance, right? Which in other words, money is valuable. And she's like, it's not money. And then, of course, I went friends, family. She's like, it's not friends or family. She goes, the one thing that you're going to learn as you get older is money is exponential. You can have as much money as you want. Now, that was something odd for me to hear, especially because we were living in the hood, that you could have as much money as you want. You can't have as much money as you want. And she said, you can have as much money as you want. It's all about what you're willing to do and how you're willing to work for it. So that was the first kind of interesting lesson. She goes, so money doesn't have as much value as you think because there's so much of it. Anybody can get it. So it's really not that valuable. And she goes, and the other thing about money is someone can always come and take it away. So that changed things for me. And then I said, well, family. She said, most people would also say that family is one of the most valuable things that you would have. She said, however, and then she started pointing out people in my family, right? Like grandma was throwing shade. She's like, however, your Uncle Alfred is a drunk who comes here all the time and causes problems. She goes, that's not a value. That's an anchor. Okay. And she said, sometimes you have to get rid of anchors out of your life. Here's another lesson I just learned from my grandmother. That family isn't the end all be all, that just because they're crazy and stupid don't mean you have to stay with them. So she's taught me two lessons. One is that money is exponential, which means it's not that valuable. You can get it anywhere. Okay. Number two, family ain't always the best thing. Sometimes you got crazy Uncle Alfreds that get too drunk and cause too many problems, and they're anchors, and you got to drop those anchors. So now I'm really wondering, what are the most valuable things in my life? And these were the three things that my grandmother taught me were the most valuable things in my life. The first thing she told me was time was one of the most valuable things I could have. And she said, you think time goes on forever. And while time goes on forever, you're only given so much of it. In fact, what you're given in this life for time is so limited that you shouldn't even waste a breath. You shouldn't waste an inhale waiting on an exhale. Like she made it seem like time would be gone at any moment. And even though I was very young at that time, it wasn't truly until I was 18, almost 19 years old, that lesson really hit home. See, what a lot of people don't know about me is that I had a daughter. I have two sons now, and they're 26 and 30. But I had a daughter before I had my sons, and my daughter died when she was 5 months old. That whole concept about time suddenly hit home. That we don't have that much time, that it is extremely limited. And I remember my grandmother even telling me that I wasn't mourning for my daughter, because even when my daughter cried, she was already gone. She goes, you're mourning for yourself because you won't be able to see her. So that lesson, though I heard it when I was so much younger, it really didn't hit home and punch me in the face until I was literally 18, 19 years old. That's when time all of a sudden became the most valuable thing in the world, because I had lost the most precious thing in the world that had only been here for 5 months. Her time was so much more limited than I expected it to be. Then time became important to me. Here were the other two things that she taught me. The other two things that you have of value are your integrity and your intellect. Three things: your integrity, your intellect, and time. And then she taught me probably the lesson that I would tell you changed my life. She said, don't ever barter your integrity or your time for money. Now, for y'all who don't know, for y'all out there who don't know, I'm going to tell you what this really meant. What my grandma was explaining to this young girl who lived in the hood, she was honestly telling me, she was trying to tell me in a very proper way not to be a hooker. I know that sounds so bad to some of y'all, but she was really trying to tell me, don't ever trade out your body and your time for money. That was integrity at that time. But then she taught me, when I got older, I really understood what that integrity was. But even when I was homeless, I never traded my integrity or my time for dollars. So those were the two things. Don't trade your integrity and your time for dollars. And then she said, if you're going to trade anything for money, it's got to be your intellect. So you have to make sure that you put your intellect and your skills to such a high value that people will want them more so than anything else. Now you have to realize that when she taught me these lessons, it was before I was a teenager. I learned these lessons from a 4th grade dropout. My grandmother dropped out of school when she was in the 4th grade in order to help raise a family. She was 4th grade, and she taught me the most valuable lessons in my life. Money is exponential. Family might be an anchor. The 3 most valuable things you have in your life are integrity, time, and intellect. Never barter your integrity and time for $1. You can always trade your intellect. Now, I got to tell you why that became impactful for me. When I was homeless, there became a point where there was no food. right? So there's no food, there's no shower, there's no conditioner to keep these curls right. There's none of those things. I am literally living out of a car. My food has gone. I am struggling. And whereas a lot of people would have traded maybe their intellect to get a bite to eat or whatever they wanted, I always remembered that my grandmother told me, don't trade your integrity, trade your intellect, trade your skills, but don't trade your time, don't trade your integrity. And that's actually what made me go and find someone who could use my skills. I'm like, I could wash a window. If I wash the windows of the Y, will you let me take a shower? And that was like my first real barter, right? It was my first real barter. And then when I started working and I got a regular job, it wasn't until I sat down and I did some math, right? So there is a point that you do have to barter your intelligence and your skills for time. And that is to get more skills. And it was funny because I remember talking to my grandmother about this much later in life, like when I was in my 20s. And I was like, Grandma, I know you said that, but what about getting a job so I can get the skills so I can leverage my intellect? And she said, no, that's okay. Because at the end of the day, you're getting something greater than the money. You're getting more intellect. See, you're trading your intellect right now and your time to get money, but you're only really trading your time to get money so you can boost your intellect, and that's fine. So once I understood that, I'm like, okay, so that's okay. Then what happened was I got to a point where I was like, I could do this on my own. I can actually go and trade my intellect for more money. And this is what happened. So I was working at this company and I realized that it was going to be, for me to make $1 million at that company, they were going to have to go from paying me $25 an hour to $500 an hour. And as I looked at the ladder, I could not see how I was going to move from a $25 an hour. I don't even think I was making $25 an hour. I think I was making like $9 or $10 an hour. And when I looked at the ladder, I couldn't figure out how I was going to get from $10 an hour to $500 an hour. And this is what I'm saying. There are 2,000 work hours in a year, 2,000, right? So if you worked 50 weeks at 40 hours a week, that's 2,000 hours. You got 2 weeks for vacation. If they're paying you, great. If they're not, you got 2,000 work hours. So if you take those 2,000 work hours, you multiply it by $500, that's how you're going to get to $1 million. And I could not see a way to get to that million. I couldn't see it. I'm like, how am I going to make that there? So I had to start thinking differently. And I said, I need to find a job where they're going to pay me $500 an hour. Well, that same year, a list of CEOs came out. And the CEO at our company was one of the top paying CEOs in our area, right? And the CEO of our company was on that list. And I remember I was like 20 years old, 21, 22. And I remember at that time thinking, I need to figure out how to become a C-level executive, and not one of these fake C-level executives, not one of these people who go on social media and they went and started a website, so now they're a CEO. That's not what I mean. I meant a real CEO of a real company. So I really wanted to know how to do this. And all I kept remembering was my grandmother said, it's your intellect. You have to get smarter. But what she taught me beyond that, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, I hear people all the time. They're like, I read 52 books a year. I read a book a day. I read a book every hour. I just got through reading a book during this conversation. And then I'm like, dude, you studying to be on Jeopardy? They don't do jack with it, right? They got the intellect. Yeah, they learned something or they consumed something, but they haven't put it into practice. They haven't really turned it into anything. Right. So I hear these people all the time, like, I read these books. People ask me the same thing all the time. Well, Dawnna, how did you become a programmer? You really want to know what I did? I went and I got a book. I cracked open that book to the first page and I started reading it. And when I started reading that book, after I started reading that book, whatever it said were the exercises at the end of that chapter. I started doing those exercises. And then I went to the next chapter, and whatever, I don't even care if they could have had examples, and it was programming examples, and I would do those programming examples. I had no idea what I was doing, but if they had an example in there, I would type up the example and I would try it. And I just kept doing this over and over again. I wasn't in a race to read the damn book. I wanted to increase not just my knowledge, but my skills. I hear people all the time, I read 52 books. Great. How did you use it? I get people all the time. I went and listened to your live streams on entrepreneurship. Great. How did you use it? It is one of the reasons, and it was so funny because it wasn't until I talked to this guy from Forbes today that it really hit me. He said, everything that you just said just now totally makes sense why you run your business the way you do. So we were talking about Biz on Fire. And he said, I noticed that you have it where people have to apply or they have to message you that they just can't get in. And I said, right. He said, why not? He goes, you could just record yourself on a webinar and you could just sell that. And I'm like, no. And he said, why not? And I said, because it's not about people just sitting and freaking listening to me. It's about people actually participating, taking in the information, leveraging it, increasing their knowledge and their skills. I actually want to see what I teach people. Go to use, get to work. I really get excited when people make money. I'm like, yes, you did it. I'm like the biggest freaking cheerleader of someone else's success. I really want to see that. I really want to know that one of the things that I've always wanted to do is being a seed to other people's success. And so, yeah, even when I have I have Biz on Fire, the Biz on Fire Virtual Academy, which is live instructor led, starts tomorrow. Guess what? We don't let everybody in because I'm not about having people just watch. We did a webinar the other day, and it was funny because I was actually talking to Jessica at the webinar and after the webinar, and Jessica watched it and she's like, I thought it was great. And I said, really? She goes, yeah. And I'm like, I hated it. And she goes, why? I said, because people come on these webinars and they watch. They don't participate. I'm asking questions and they're so used to watching these fake evergreen webinars where there's not a real live person on the other end that they've been trained to sit there, shut the hell up and put their phone on mute and just listen in the background and don't participate. And I'm sitting there going, I'm asking questions. Y'all ain't answering. I don't know if y'all know this, but I already know these answers. I've already built a couple of businesses. I really don't need to know this. So it's one of those things where that I understand there's a behavior that people are so used to, but quite honestly, it is your intellect and your skills and your ability to take that intellect and those skills and get yourself to the next level. But here's the challenge that you run into with the people who have the hardest time becoming entrepreneurs are quite honestly the people that have read all the damn books. Because if you was a lot more dumber and you knew one thing, there'd be no problem. We would know exactly what to pick for your business. But the biggest problem is that people are so smart that they've read all these books that they can't pick because they like everything. I would challenge you the next time that you decide that you're going to pick up a book, that you pick up a book that you're actually going to do something with other than consume the information, that you're going to use it to take to the next level. I don't care if it's the next programming book. I don't care if it's The Six. I don't care if it's 50 Shades of Grey. As long as you pick up something out of there you're going to use. Take your knowledge and put it to work so you can stop trading your time for dollars. Yes, I know some people have to be employees, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you're really not interested in working on your dream, hey, come work for me. You can work on mine. Anyway, I just thought I wanted to share that with you guys because it really kind of impacted me when somebody said, what was the thing that drove you? And of course, I immediately thought about my grandma. Anyway, I do miss her. It's been several years and I love her dearly, but it's one of those people that changed my life. Anyway, you guys have an absolutely positively fantastic day. Biz on Fire Virtual Academy starts out for my brand new entrepreneurs who are so ready to take it from 0 to 60. I love it. I cannot wait because they're going to get in and they're going to learn the baseline of what it takes to get their business from where it is to where they want to be. I'm not pitching at all, but people always hit me up. If you are interested in getting in the academy, it does meet 2 days a week for 1 hour. It is live. There's none of that watch me talk and don't interact. But if you're interested, send me a private message, because it starts in the morning. So if you want to get in, you need to send me a direct message and I'll get you on. Anyway, because there's only a few spots left. So everybody ain't gonna get in. Just letting you know. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. I hope you have a fantastic day.